Language learning is a fascinating process, especially at the beginning stages when you know next to nothing about the language you're studying. You learn so many interesting things all the time, and even today, I am still amazed by the French language. I'm constantly learning new words, vocabulary, expressions, grammatical nuances, and that's just to name a few. So when you start learning French, there are definitely a few basics you need to understand just about how the language works in general. So let's get right into these quick little French basics that you'll discover in French that don't exist in English. All right, so learning a language is a long process. So just to keep it simple here, I don't want to overwhelm you as a beginner. I'm just going to scratch the surface here in this video, just perfect for beginners who have just started to learn French. So first, if you're new here, bonjour, welcome, bienvenue, I'm Diane. This is We in France, and we're going to get right into number one. Okay, number one, you don't show possession with an apostrophe S. And this is one of the top basic French language concepts to understand from the get-go. So in French, you show possession by structuring the sentence in a certain way, like this. You would literally say, the dog of Diane, and not Diane's dog. The apostrophe is not used to show possession in French. So just to clarify, you will see an apostrophe in French, but it's not used to indicate a possession of something like we would in English. So you'll see it in words like today, aujourd'hui. You'll see it in qu'est-ce que, which is what, and other instances. The apostrophe is there. So if you want to say Diane's house is white, you'd literally write the house of Diane is white. La maison de Diane est blanche. In English, you can certainly say the house of Diane is white instead of using the apostrophe S, Diane's house, but it might sound like a non-natural construction and you might get a few strange looks, especially if you're a native speaker. There's nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't quite sound as natural as saying Diane's house. In French, it's not a matter of sounding natural. There's literally no other option. So the sentence structure is always the X of X, the house of Diane, the dog of Diane, and it's just one of these French language basics you really need to commit to memory right away. Okay, moving on, number two. Nouns have a gender. So in English, nouns, a person, place, or thing, they're just nouns. They don't have a gender. They're always written the same way. A table is a table. A house is a house. And these articles before the noun and the noun itself, they don't change in pronunciation or spelling in English. In French and some other languages, nouns have a gender. They're either masculine or feminine in French, and this can affect two things. One, the article before the noun, it's either masculine or feminine. Two, the gender can affect the spelling of the adjective, if there is one. So sometimes the pronunciation as well, but just bear with me for a minute. The noun and the adjective have to agree. So let me get into some examples for you. And to do that, you kind of need to know, as a beginner, you'll make mistakes, it's fine. But if you want to get it right, you need to know the gender of your noun, both when writing and speaking. So luckily in French, you'll have a 50% chance of getting it right since there are only two, masculine or feminine. And with words you use all the time, you'll have no problem with this because you'll know them. But for more unfamiliar words that you use or see once in a blue moon, it can get tricky. The good part is that messing up the gender won't affect comprehension. People will still understand you. They might correct you, I welcome it because I want to know what I'm doing wrong, but then I'll mess it up the next time I use the word, right? But after you use the word like 500 times, you just seem to commit it to memory what the gender is. So just to give you some examples, let me start with the purple door. In French, that's la porte violette. And I'm overemphasizing here so you could hear it. La porte violette. In this example, door is feminine. La porte, la means the, and that's the feminine version of that. The color purple is violet, but because it's feminine here, because of the door, we have to say violette, and that's pronounced violette. So in French, sometimes you get a little bit of context from the sentence, whereas in English, you don't. Let's take the example, my cousin is tall. In English, we don't know if that's a female or male cousin, but in French, mon cousin est grand versus ma cousine est grande. Just from hearing that, you know if we're talking about a female cousin or a male cousin. Okay, moving on, adjective placement. So in addition to the basics in French that I just told you about in number two, about gender, adjectives also have their place in a sentence, and it's not always where you'd expect to find the adjective because in English it's different. So in my examples, you'll see that the color comes after the noun, which is the opposite of English. In English, we'll say the blue car, not the car blue. So adjectives like colors, shapes, and nationalities, for example, always go after the noun. But because it's French, there are always exceptions. Generally speaking, the following types of adjectives come before the noun, but there's always exceptions. So just kind of commit that to memory, but no, it might not always be the case. Descriptors of beauty, like joli, beau. Age, like nouveau, vieux, new and old. Goodness, like gentil, bon. Size, like petit or grand, short and small or tall. They all come before the noun. But yes, like I said, there are exceptions, like méchant, that would come after. Okay, the other thing to watch out for with adjective placement is that sometimes the adjective will come before or after, depending on the meaning of what you're trying to say. So let me give you an example. Let's take last week. La semaine dernière and la dernière semaine. Both can be correct, but they mean different things. So the first, last week, means last week as in the passage of time, like literally the week that came before this one. So, il a plu la semaine dernière. It rained last week. The second means the last week of whatever you're talking about. So maybe the last week of vacation. So, cette semaine est la dernière semaine de vacances pour les enfants. This week is the last week of vacation for the kids. So to make it even trickier, note that dernier is the masculine form, but since week, semaine is feminine, une semaine, last becomes dernière with that E at the end. All right, if you're still with me, let's get right on to number 4. Inverted questions. When asking a question in English and in French, both languages have words that will signify it's a question. So in English, we might start a sentence with something like do you, or are we, or is she. And in French, we could start with est-ce que, qu'est-ce que, an interrogative word like qui, which means who, or pourquoi, which means why. And another way we can form a question in French that doesn't work the same way in English is to invert that subject and verb. Now, this is a bit more formal, so let me just give you an example. Do you speak Spanish? You can say, est-ce que tu parles espagnol? But using the inversion method, it would be, parles-tu espagnol? Literally, speak you Spanish? It seems a little strange since we don't do this in English, but it's totally normal, totally above board in French. And just keep in mind, I did say this can come across as more formal, so you might not hear it quite as often as putting in est-ce que, or even in casual speech, you might just use the proper intonation to signify it's a question. So instead of saying parles-tu, you would just say, tu parles espagnol? And come up at the end. So with your intonation signifies that it's a question. But just one thing, if the verb and noun end in vowels, you have to add a T in between to make it sound pretty. So does she like traveling? Instead of aime-elle voyager, it's aime-t-elle voyager? And yes, in French, you put a space after that last letter of the sentence and before the question mark at the end. All right, lastly, there is an informal and formal way to say the word you. In French, we say the word you two ways. The informal, familiar way is tu, and the formal way, the word you use when addressing more than one person or in a formal situation, is vous. And I have a couple of videos here on the channel about French pronunciation and just French sounds and how to make them, some tips being a foreigner myself, including the French u in tu and the ou sound in vous. So I'll just link that here. But to keep it simple about when to use which, know that when you speak to a friend or family member, someone you know well, or a child, use tu. And in a professional context at work, with people you don't really know, in a store, a professional setting, someone older, you use vous. Now this is just a very basic overview. It does get more complicated than that, so I'm just gonna leave it there. But a good rule of thumb, if you're unsure, is to always default on the more polite side than being too informal. So when in doubt, definitely use vous, the more formal way to say you. So if you're just getting started with French and you don't know any French at all, this video might have left your head spinning, but honestly, it becomes second nature. The more you learn, the better you get. So just start one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. Everything will just become second nature. So you'll just learn it quickly as you get going, and you'll continue to build on what you've started. So keep at it. And I would love to hear from you down below in the comments. What about you? Have you ever struggled with these concepts as a beginner in French, as someone just getting acquainted with a new language? I'd love to hear about it below, and feel free to share your tips to help others, because I feel like we can be a really great resource for other foreigners trying to learn French. And as always, finally, if you enjoyed this, I would love for you to click above for a playlist with other French language learning content, have a look at some other videos on my channel, and be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you right back here on We in France soon. Salut!